Samuel Huntington and the Clash of Civilizations. This is going to be the good, the bad, and the really ugly. So this has been a theory attacked over and over again. So let's talk about the good to begin with, right? What Samuel Huntington brings to the table, that's tough to say, is the fact that you have not a state of a unitary rational actor, right? Like a lot of people say, they're clashing out there, security reasons, self-interest, economics, etc. What he basically focuses on is culture, political identity, etc. So that conflict isn't going to just start attributable to, say, the resources or the clash of the Soviet Union and United States, ideological. It's going to clash because of cultures. So the clash of civilizations, these are civilizations basically, and they're going to clash because of their differences. And these differences are both within states and outside of states. So this is what he calls fault lines, F-A-U-L-T-L-I-N-E-S. And now I'm very proud of myself to be able to spell that because I'm a terrible speller. But the thing is, these fault lines can be within a country. So if you look at the former Yugoslavia, you know, after the death of Tito, you know, the IMF, World Bank went in, decreased public goods, a lot of people say, the old communist line was out, etc. People started, you know, re-emerging or emerging and coming out of this Cold War scenario with more religious identity, you know, cultural identity, linguistic identity, where if you talked about it before, Tito, the dictator of Yugoslavia, who he supported because he kicked Stalin out, and Yugoslavia is in a very strategic part of Eastern Europe as a buffer zone against the Soviet Union. So we supported him, but after we didn't need Yugoslavia, we just let it go, just like we did with Afghanistan, and the Taliban took over, not recently, but after the Soviet Union was kicked out. But the point is that, you know, these people started identifying more and more and more, maybe it was always there, with their religion, with their culture, with their identity, with their language. So what happens is that it became a clash of quote unquote civilizations, and you know, the former Yugoslavia just you know, just no longer is the former Yugoslavia. I mean, we had genocide, war, Bosnia-Herzegovina. We can sit here and talk all day about Kosovo, etc. But his value, I think, is he's focusing on something else. There's linguistic, there's all these other differences of culture, and this will create conflict. And these fault lines can be, you know, within a state like the former Yugoslavia, or within another state that has different like ethnic groups, religious groups, etc. And it could be between groups, Armenia, Azerbaijan, etc., that have different maybe cultures, religions, etc. Obviously 9/11, the one where the United States was attacked, not the one where we helped overthrow Allende in Chile, which was also in 9/11 in the 70s. But, you know, really this started becoming more prominent. Oh, Islam is violent, etc. I don't believe any religion is intrinsically necessarily violent. Cults are, and certain divisions of them and ideologies are, Nazism, etc. But the idea is that, you know, this is going to be a clash of cultures. Not everyone is going to do this democratic dance, that there's different cultures, and 9/11 really helped solidify Huntington's approach. And I think the value, like I said, is we do have to focus on linguistic, cultural, and other differences. It's not just about, you know, ideology, and it's not, well, though that kind of forms an ideology, and it's not just about, say, resources, like, oh, we go to Iraq, fight for oil. So, but what's the bad? The bad is it's kind of a simplistic theory. He just laid it out like all the Asians together, and then Japan. You know, like, oh, the Koreans, the Vietnamese, and, you know, the Chinese, they're all the same. You know what I mean? This real kind of gringo-esque, US-centric, English-based view of the world. So, and for him, he said the Latin Americans. And as you can see behind me, if you've seen other videos of me, I talk about the indigenous people of Latin America. This is the Mapuche indigenous people. I talk about in the global politics, that's at the beginning, nation state system. This is very, very interesting, the clash of civilizations. Because from a national, I'll use it in a number of classes, because you've got to ask yourself, like, from a national security point of view, should we focus on culture, language, religion, etc.? Does this create clash? Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at even Nazi Germany with their quote unquote Christian, I know a lot of people say, no, 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 I'm Christian, I'm not a Nazi. I understand that. I was brought up Catholic, but that's, they saw themselves as this Christian identity, this fanatical. Even Timothy McVeigh, as some of you might know, in the Oklahoma bombing, took, a kind of a real strong nationalist, anti-government view. And a lot of these people see religion, whether it's Sunni, Shia, or language skills, etc., like mine is superior to yours. It is true that this might cause conflict. And this is important to see, because if this does, like, the Basques want to break away from both Spain, and there is a Spanish Basque country, and Catalonia wants to break away from Spain. So it is valuable to understand. So, this is an important thing to study, because basically we shouldn't just see states and people as rational actors, that is, they're just out for their own self-interest, but there's certain cultures and religions and linguistic identities, etc., that cause conflict. So that means if we're going to train the military, we need to train people in languages, different cultures, etc., which, if you saw my daughter Maria Tea's video, we don't do, because we don't understand a lot of people. So I think it's valuable, but I think the problem with Huntington, and this is important for every class, whether it's global politics, national security, etc., is that it brings this to the forefront of analysis, which is good, right? This whole culture, the fault lines, right? So the fault lines could be within a state. It could be in Nigeria, where so many different languages speak. But at the same time, he was so dismissive and so gringo with it. It's like I just said, just the Asians all together, Africans all together, Islam. It's like there are huge differences here. Like, if Latin America, to say Latin Americans, that doesn't make any sense. So this gets really ugly, because it's like, just he brings an important thing, to study to the table. But it gets so simplistic, like the typical Joe six-pack gringo, like, those Asians, those Latinos, you know what I mean? And then he goes on about how, all these Latin Americans that come here don't want to speak English, which is completely untrue. English is the, world. Sorry to be imperialist, but important language. Like, my kids are Latin American, and I wish they spoke Spanish better. They really assimilate well here in the United States. And he's like, oh, well, the Polish did better and stuff, but it's not like based on any kind of real research. And by lumping these groups together in like these 7 groups, it's like the Asians, then the Japanese is one group. And, those are 2 separate groups. Why? The Vietnamese and the Koreans are just the same. And, all the Latinos are the same. No, there's huge class, indigenous, like the Mapuche indigenous people don't, consider themselves Chilean nor Argentinian like they want. In fact, there's a new conflict emerging from that. And, all the Africans are the same. Are you kidding me? There's like 1,000 different languages in Africa. It's very, very simplistic. And this is the ugly part of it, because if this was like a community school teacher, people would be like, this guy's crazy, but because he's at Harvard, and this is in and itself the problem. If you get linked towards a big institution like Harvard, the World Bank, or IMF, you all of a sudden get this kind of, gust of invincibility, like, oh, well, a Harvard professor said this. And when they do debates, they'll always say that, like, my students will say, this Stanford economist said. But so what? I mean, just because they're at Stanford doesn't mean they're right. If you look back and look at the worst decisions ever, like, the Treaty of Versailles, the Dawes Plan that put Germany in massive arrays, those were all supported by top economists. I mean, just because you're a top economist, or even win a Nobel Prize, doesn't mean you're right. This is the problem. So, because Huntington is at Harvard, people are like, oh man, this is great. This has to be published by Cambridge University Press. But it's very simple. He's a very, I mean, it's nothing against him. Of course, he could say, who are you to, I'm Samuel Huntington. But if he's alive, I don't even know if he died or not. But, this is the problem. These simple theories, if you look, the end of history, And, these ideas, the simplicity that these bigwigs kind of communicate, that kind of take hold, and then, Newsweek does an article on them and stuff. This is the ugly part, I think, of it. But I do think that there is a value. Fukuyama is the end of history. I knew someone who worked with him. No, it's just these simple ideas like, after, the fall of the Cold War, the end of history, it's going to be great. And I remember being a little older than a lot of people listening, there was this idea, there's going to be this just triangular thing. There was a famous book. I read it in Spanish, actually, when I was living in Nicaragua, and it's going to be the European Union, Japan, and the United States. It's like, nope, that didn't pan out at all. China rose, and now China, it's these ideas that get taken, Big Mac theory. If you have a McDonald's, there's less likely to have conflict, which is completely untrue, because, Nicaragua had McDonald's, UK and Argentina had McDonald's, Russia and Georgia had McDonald's. So, but these simple ideas by these bigwigs kind of take hold, and, sometimes they have value, and I understand they're more complex and they just want to communicate it. Like if you agreed to the Big Mac theory, it's more integration, less likelihood of conflict. And I get it. And I think there is some value, but I think people take and run with it. And I think Huntington's value is that bringing these to the forefront of analysis, but he does it in such a way that's a bit offensive to a lot of people. And it should be, just lumping people together and saying, these Muslims, it's like, no, it's a lot more complex than that. But I do think the value is bringing it to the forefront of analysis. And I'll let you people decide whether or not you think the Clash of Civilizations. But there's real policy prescription here, because if you do subscribe to this theory, right, then you want to train militaries, you want to train state departments, not just in this country, but elsewhere, in more language skills, critical languages, cultural skills, etc. It's not just about, I teach the political statistics class using our studio, and it's not just about, like Bueno de Mosquito, if you've seen that TED Talk where he uses computer modeling. It's not just about that. We have to understand people's histories, cultures, language, and religions to understand the world conflict and to create peace. So I'll let you people decide for yourself, but that's it in a nutshell. But the most important thing about, I think, this theory is the fault lines, that these fault lines lie not just between states like Soviet Union and the United States, and ideologies, capitalism, communism, which is a simplistic way anyways, but through these cultural understandings of the world. And this is what creates conflict. So again, I'll let you people decide whether you think it's a good theory or not, and we can duke it out in some debates in some of these classes. And I hope to hear from you and hear your opinions on this.